1980X is a coming-of-age story told through the main character's discovery, adoration, and interaction with arcades as they were in the mid to late 80s. The game was created thanks to a successful Kickstarter campaign started by Hybrid Studios out of Sweden. Near completion of the game, they announced that it would be completed in parts, and the current 1980X is part 1 of the full story being created by Hybrid Studios. 1980X is told through cutscenes between short bursts of arcade games modeled after some of the most popular genres of the time. The first game you experience upon starting the story mode of 1980X is Beating Heart, modeled after games like Streets of Rage, River City Ransom, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the arcade game. It's got smooth gameplay, a few weapon pickups, health, and a decent variety of enemies. Honestly, it's a pretty great representation of the genre, even if it is a bit short. Sadly, the length of the games is one of the things that will carry on through the whole entirety of 1980X. All the games tend to be pretty short and give you just kind of the surface level of what that genre was like. On the positive side, even though all the games are short, they're extremely well polished, and the gameplay really highlights how much effort was put into each individual game type. They all feel great, they all play great, and they all live up to essentially the genres they're trying to emulate. As you complete each arcade game, you're met with more of the main character's storyline, and Hybrid Studios has definitely made an interesting narrative that keeps you pulled in. It's nothing too crazy, but just enough that you feel yourself really starting to buy into the world and the story that they're creating here. And especially if you have any 80s or 90s nostalgia of going to an arcade, you're really going to kind of feel that in the story and kind of relate a little bit to the main character.
Definitely no hangout for children. In front of these machines stood some of the coolest, uncool people I had ever seen. They were the freaks, the geeks, the misfits, the outcasts, the real rebels.
The second game you encounter is Out of the Void. It's a side-scrolling shooter similar in style to that of Gradius or R-Type. It's a fun space shooter that definitely isn't as hard as either of those games, but at least gives a little bit of a challenge and is a pretty good emulation, like I'd said before. The boss battles in Out of the Void are pretty fun and definitely over the top, and that's kind of what you're looking for in those side-scrolling shooters, is over-the-top bosses. The third game is The Runaway. It's a throwback to games like Outrun, and is just a basic, behind-the-back racer, I guess you could say, driving game. But it's definitely the least challenging of all 5 games in 1980X. Part of that is just because the second part of The Runaway is basically a cutscene that you just get to continue driving in. What I would like to highlight in The Runaway is how amazing the art is. The sprites, the backgrounds, the music, it all comes together and creates a really great experience, even if it isn't very challenging.
I started hanging out in the arcade.
The fourth game is Shadowplay. It's a side-scrolling auto-runner that definitely has shades of Strider, and this is the most difficult of all 5 games. It relies heavily on you having either fast reflexes or memorizing the patterns of the enemies to traverse the multiple levels thrown at the player. Killscreen is the final game. It's a classic dungeon crawler RPG that mixes gameplay and story to really bring the narrative that Hyben is creating to a head for part 1. It's a great ending point and is definitely, I think, the correct game that they would end on. It makes the most sense, and the exploratory nature of it really just adds a little bit to that final game that you would play. Not having a time limit, and especially the fact that you can even grind out levels if you would like, even though it's not necessary, is just a nice little touch. Overall, I feel that 1980X is extremely polished, the music is amazing, and the story and atmosphere really bring it all together. If you have any nostalgia about that time period or arcades in general, it's definitely worth a playthrough, especially for the price that they're charging for just $10. Or if you can pick it up in a Humble Bundle or a Humble Monthly, which is how I actually found out about the game. It just makes it a great deal and a fun playthrough. The game isn't long, and I know I mentioned that before, but a first playthrough will generally only take you an hour and a half, and speedruns usually clock in around 45 to 50 minutes.
I honestly couldn't say.
That being said, I do still recommend the game, like I said, especially for the price.
Nothing was the same.
And if you can find it for even less if it's on sale, you would be doing yourself a disservice to not pick it up.
The game was not over. It was just beginning.